Afghanistan doesn't wake you gently. It wakes you with the crack of distant gunfire echoing off barren hills, with the metallic clank of armored doors shutting like a warning, with the smell of diesel and sand swirling together until the air feels heavy enough to choke you. Captain Maria Isabel Torres had been here long enough to know the rhythm of this place, the fragile balance between routine and disaster. The sun rose early and harsh, spilling gold over miles of endless dust, and by mid-morning it pressed down on you like a weight you couldn't shake off. Her boots sank slightly into the dry earth. With each step, the crunch beneath them almost lost under the constant background symphony of bass life generators, humming radios, hissing with coded chatter, weapons being checked with deliberate, practiced hands. Maria's eyes were sharp, scanning the horizon in a way only soldiers do, trained to see danger before it sees you. Her uniform carried the marks of long days, streaks of sand across the sleeves, faint smudges from carrying heavy gear, and the dark circles under her eyes that no amount of sleep could erase. But beyond the patrol schedules, the mission briefings, and the unspoken tension that came with every day in a combat zone, she carried something heavier. The memory of James, her late husband. His laugh, his warm hands, the way he used to plan for the children they'd have someday. The embryos they'd created together were supposed to be the promise of that future. Now they were frozen in a clinic thousands of miles away, her last link to him. Out here, in the middle of a war zone, it was easier to keep that grief tucked away. The desert was good at swallowing pain. Its vastness made personal loss seem small by comparison. Or at least Maria believed that, until the phone rang. And in that moment, the war outside would become nothing compared to the war waiting for her at home. The satellite phone in the corner of the room wasn't supposed to ring at this hour. Out here, in the middle of Afghanistan, calls from home usually meant one of two things: a holiday greeting or bad news. Maria picked it up, pressing it tightly against her ear to block out the background hum of the generator. On the other end, a bright professional voice spoke as if delivering wonderful news. "Captain Torres, this is Dr. Hoffman from Pacific Fertility Center. I'm calling to congratulate you on your successful implantation. All 3 embryos took. You're having triplets." The words hit her so hard she almost didn't process them. Triplets. Her body went still, the desert heat suddenly forgotten. She sat up so fast that her head struck the bunk above her. "What implantation?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "I'm deployed in Afghanistan." There was a pause, paper rustling. The voice on the line grew hesitant. "The implantation performed 2 weeks ago. You came in with your husband." "My husband died 14 months ago," she said, each word steady but shaking inside. "His death is the reason I deployed." More silence. Then the doctor's voice, softer now, as if realizing he was standing in the middle of something terrible. "Ma'am, according to our records, Elena Torres underwent embryo transfer on October 15th. Maria's pulse pounded in her ears. "Elena Torres is my sister, and those embryos were from my IVF cycle. They're the only genetic material I have left from my husband." She could hear the panic start to creep into the doctor's voice, the sound of papers flipping faster. The signatures, the ID, everything shows Elena Torres as the patient. And right there in the middle of a combat zone, Maria realized the unthinkable. While she was serving her country, thousands of miles away, her own sister had taken her identity and stolen her future. Maria sat there, the phone still pressed to her ear, her mind caught between disbelief and rage. She had not set foot in that fertility clinic since before James died. The embryos were supposed to wait frozen in time until she was ready to bring them into the world. And she wasn't ready. How could she be? 14 months had passed since the accident that stole James from her, a late-night call, twisted metal, and the unbearable silence that followed. He'd been her anchor, her compass, and without him, she had drifted into a storm she didn't know how to navigate. That's why she deployed again, not because she didn't want children, not because she didn't care, but because the thought of raising a child alone with her heart still raw felt impossible. Serving overseas gave her a purpose that grief couldn't erase. And now someone had stolen that choice. "Those embryos are all I have left of him," she said into the phone, her voice low but fierce. It wasn't just genetic material. It was their future, the life they had planned together. To think that someone her own sister had walked into that clinic, used her name, her identity, and claimed that future as her own. It was almost too much to comprehend. The desert outside might have been scorching, but in that moment, Maria felt cold. Not the kind of cold that comes from weather, but the kind that seeps into your bones when you realize the war you're fighting is no longer out there. It's at home, wearing a familiar face. The doctor's voice trembled slightly as he read the name from the chart again, like he was trying to confirm it for himself. The patient who came in for the transfer, her name is Elena Isabel Torres. Maria froze. The name wasn't just familiar, it was family. "Elena is my sister," she said slowly, as if speaking the words might change them, but nothing changed. The truth sat there heavy and undeniable. The realization was like taking a hit to the chest. Not an enemy, not a stranger. But her own blood had crossed a line she didn't even think existed. "She's pregnant," the doctor continued quietly, "with the embryos from your IVF cycle." Maria's grip tightened around the phone until her knuckles went white. Her mind flashed with Elena, smiling Elena, hugging her at James's funeral, Elena promising she'd always be there for her. And now, Elena had taken the last pieces of James, their future children, and placed them in her own body without permission. In the battlefield, Maria had trained herself to expect betrayal from those who wore the wrong uniform. But this was a betrayal wearing her own last name. Maria didn't wait. She ended the call with the doctor and punched Elena's number into the keypad with shaking fingers. Elena answered on the third ring, her voice bright and casual, like nothing was wrong. "Maria, how's the desert treating you?" Maria didn't waste a second. "Are you pregnant with my embryos?" There was a pause, just long enough for Maria to hear the truth in the silence. Then Elena's tone shifted, defensive but almost smug. "You weren't using them." Maria's stomach twisted. "They weren't just sitting there for anyone to take. They were mine, Elena, mine and James's. We created them for when I was ready." Elena's voice hardened. "Ready, Maria. You've been deployed again and again. You're 37. When were you planning to be ready? After another tour? After another year goes by?" Maria clenched her jaw. "That wasn't your decision to make." "Someone had to make it," Elena shot back. "Those embryos deserved a chance at life." "They were my children, with my dead husband," Maria said, her voice breaking on the last word. "And you took them without asking. You stole them." Elena gave a short, humorless laugh. "Technically, they're mine now. Possession is 9/10 of the law, right?" Maria pulled the phone away from her ear for a second, staring at it in disbelief, as if it might explain how her own sister could sound so casual about committing the most personal theft imaginable. The moment Maria hung up with Elena, her hands were still shaking. There was only one other person she could think to call. The one who had always told her family came first, her mother. The line clicked, and her mother's voice came through warm and cheerful. "Oh, honey, I heard the wonderful news." Maria's stomach dropped. "You knew?" "Of course I knew," her mother said, as if it were obvious. "I drove Elena to the appointments. She needed support." "Support?" Maria's voice rose. "You helped her steal my embryos?" Her mother's tone sharpened. Steal is such a harsh word. We relocated them to a womb that's ready. Elena has been trying for years, Maria. This is a blessing. Maria's grip on the phone tightened. My womb is viable. My body is healthy. You just don't like that I'm serving overseas. You chose deployment over motherhood, her mother shot back. Elena chose life. No, Maria said, her voice breaking but firm. I chose to serve after my husband died. Those embryos were for when I was ready. That was my choice to make, not yours and not hers. There was a pause. Then her mother's voice, colder now. You've always been stubborn. But one day you'll thank us. You'll see those babies and realize we did the right thing. Maria closed her eyes, realizing something that hurt even more than the theft itself. Her mother didn't see this as a betrayal at all. She saw it as salvation. When Maria ended the call with her mother, the tent felt smaller. The walls seemed to close in, pressing her into a space too tight for the weight she was carrying. The grief for James had never left. It had simply been folded away, tucked into the quiet corners of her mind, so she could keep moving forward. But now that grief was wide open again, raw and aching, because the future they had planned together had been taken, not by fate this time, but by choice. And the choice hadn't been made by an enemy or by a stranger. It had been made by her sister and defended by her own mother. She thought of James's face in that last photograph just 2 days before the accident, his arm around her shoulders, his smile soft but steady. She had promised herself she would honor him by protecting what they'd created together. And now she had failed, not through inaction, but because the people she trusted most had crossed a line she didn't think anyone could cross. Maria sat on her bunk, elbows on her knees, hands pressed to her forehead. Out here in Afghanistan, the rules were clear. You knew who was on your side, and you knew who the enemy was. At home, those lines had blurred until she couldn't tell the difference. And that was the worst wound of all. The door to the JAG office clicked shut behind Maria, the weight of the conversation ahead pressing down on her like the desert sun outside. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Brennan looked up from a stack of files, her expression shifting from routine professionalism to something sharper the moment she saw Maria. Captain Torres, she said, voice steady but concerned, tell me everything. Maria took a deep breath and laid out the story, the stolen embryos, the identity theft, the betrayal from her sister and mother. Sarah listened carefully, then leaned forward. This is unprecedented, but there are serious charges here. Identity theft fraud and unlawful use of genetic material. She tapped a folder on the desk. Because you're active duty and deployed in a combat zone, federal laws apply with even greater weight. This isn't just a family dispute, it's a criminal matter. Maria's jaw clenched. Can we stop the pregnancy? Sarah's eyes softened, but her answer was firm. Legally, no. Courts cannot order termination. But we can prosecute the crime and fight for custody once the children are born. The reality hit Maria like a blow. The battle wasn't over, but the fight was just beginning. The JAG meeting ended with a plan. The next step was chain of command. Maria stood at attention outside the command tent. Captain Maria Isabel Torres requesting to speak with the commander. Enter. Colonel Hayes looked up. One glance at Maria's face told him this wasn't routine. At ease. Sit. She laid it out in clean soldier sentences. The impersonation, the clinic, the stolen embryos, the mother who called it salvation. She did not cry. She did not need to. The facts were enough. Hayes exhaled through his nose a long, measured breath. Your sister stole your identity while you're in theater. Understood. He didn't reach for sympathy. He reached for action. Emergency leave. Effective now. Maria blinked. Sir, my unit will survive, he said firm. We rotate your team lead. S1 processes the packet. JAG coordinates with federal partners. You get on a bird as soon as the orders print. He stood the room suddenly smaller around a larger decision. You've given this unit everything. Now you go protect what's yours. That's an order. The machine moved fast. S1 built the leave packet. JAG sent affidavits and a preliminary brief. Red Cross flagged the case. Travel booked the first seat stateside. Her squad packed her ruck in 20 minutes, sliding in a photo of James without a word. At dusk, the runway glowed like a strip of steel. Helicopter rotors carved the heat. Maria tightened the straps on her vest, orders tucked in the chest pocket like a second heartbeat. Her sergeant clasped her shoulder. "We've got your 6, ma'am. Go." She nodded once and climbed the ramp. The aircraft lifted the desert, shrinking to a map of dust and light. For the first time since the call, the path was clear. Next stop, American soil. First, the clinic with JAG and federal agents. Pacific Fertility Center looked harmless. Soft lights, ocean prints on the walls, a bowl of pens at the front desk. But the moment Captain Maria Isabel Torres walked in with Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Brennan and 2 federal agents, the room felt like a crime scene waiting to be named. The clinic director stepped out, smile tight. "How can I help you?" Sarah presented a folder. "Federal subpoena. We're here for all records tied to Captain Maria Isabel Torres and Elena Isabel Torres. We also need access to security footage for October 15th, plus chain of custody logs for embryos tagged under Torres Maria Isabel." The smile disappeared. The director gestured toward a conference room. Step 1, secure consent and scope. Maria signed a HIPAA release for her records. The agents placed a warrant on the table for the rest. The air changed, staff moved with the hushed urgency of people who knew policy was about to be tested. Step 2, pull the footage. In the security bay, monitors flickered to life. A tech scrubbed through timestamps until the cursor landed on October 15th, 09:42. There she was. Elena Isabel Torres' hair, styled like Maria's jacket, cut close to the same silhouette. Stepping up to the counter with a California driver's license, Maria's held steady in her hand. Freeze frame. The agents leaned in. One pointed. Zoom the ID. Contrast up. The screen sharpened. Name, Maria Isabel Torres. Photo, close enough to pass at a glance, but not in a room full of consequences. Step 3, map the paper trail. In the conference room files, stacked like bricks, intake forms, consent for thaw, consent for transfer, anesthesia questionnaire, nurse checklist. Sarah slid one form in front of Maria. "Is this your signature?" Maria studied the flourished M, the slanted R. "No, it's her mimic." An agent aligned the signature with a verified sample with Maria's military records. The overlay told a quiet truth. Copied, not written. Step 4. Who approved the thaw? The chain of custody log showed a thaw authorization initiated from the patient portal at 0803. IT pulled the metadata IP address traced to Alina's home network login. Maria's stolen email password changed the night before. Front desk authorization? An agent asked. The nurse manager swallowed. The patient presented photo ID and answered security questions. Sarah's eyebrow lifted. "Questions based on the file my client created." Silence. Then a nod. Step 5, witness statements. A sonographer remembered the hair. A receptionist remembered the jacket. A nurse remembered the way Maria signed without hesitating. She kept her left hand on the counter like she'd practiced the motion. Step 6, the room. Footage from procedure room 3, Elena on the table, a doctor confirming patient name, a muffled yes. The screen logged transfer complete at 10:28. Sarah closed the folder. We have identity theft, medical fraud, and unlawful use of genetic material. We have possession of a stolen ID. We have a forged signature and a digital trail from Elena's home. That's our foundation. One agent bagged the front desk photocopy of Maria's driver's license. Another sealed consent originals in evidence sleeves. The clinic director signed chain of custody forms, hands unsteady but compliant. Maria stood in front of the monitor one last time. The frozen frame showed Elena tilting her head the way Maria does when she signs deployment forms. "Enough," Maria said quietly. "Let's move." Outside, the late sun laid glass across the parking lot. Sarah tucked the subpoena back into her brief. "Next up, file charges, notify the court, and put an emergency custody action on the docket. We won't touch the pregnancy, but we'll protect what's yours the minute those babies are born." Maria nodded, jaw set. The evidence wasn't just proof. It was a map one that led from disbelief to action, from shock to justice. The tract homes on Elena Street looked ordinary, fresh paint, trimmed lawns, wind chimes speaking in the afternoon breeze. But as Captain Maria Isabel Torres stepped out of the car with Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Brennan a few steps behind, the sidewalk felt like a stage. Maria walked to the door and pressed the bell. The door opened. Elena Isabel Torres stood there in a soft maternity dress, one hand on her small bump like it was a crown. Robert, her husband, hovered just behind her. "We need to talk," Maria said. Elena's smile flickered, then settled into something practiced. "Maria, you could have called." "I did," Maria answered, voice steady. "You hung hope on my name and called it yours." Robert lifted a hand, palms open. "Let's be reasonable." Maria's eyes didn't leave Elena. "Reason left the room the day you took my ID and signed my future." Curtains moved across the street. A pair of neighbors paused on the sidewalk, whispering. The air shifted the way it does when people sense a story breaking right in front of them. "You weren't using them," Elena said, chin raised. "We gave them a chance." "You took my choice," Maria replied. "Those embryos were my children with my husband, my late husband. You didn't rescue anyone. You crossed a line and called it love." Elena's fingers tightened over the fabric on her belly. "They're safe. With me." "They're stolen," Maria said. "With you." Robert stepped forward, voice low. "We can figure this out privately." Sarah Brennan spoke for the first time, measured and calm. "There's nothing private about felony identity theft and medical fraud." A neighbor cleared his throat. "Everything okay?" Maria kept her tone even. "No, but it will be." Elena laughed, a short, brittle sound. "You think you can take them from me after I carry them?" "I think the law already knows they aren't yours," Maria said, "and so do you." More neighbors watched now, the quiet kind of watching that feels louder than shouting. Maria took a small step closer, voice soft but unyielding. "Look at me, Elena. I would have given anything for us to be on the same side, but you chose to use my grief like a key. This ends today," Maria said, "not with a scene, with accountability." Elena's eyes flashed. "You can't stop what's already inside me." "I won't try," Maria said, "but I will protect what's mine when they're born, and every step until then will have a record." Sarah checked her watch, then nodded once to Maria, an unspoken cue that the next phase was set in motion. Maria turned away from the door, shoulders squared. The neighbors parted like a tide as she passed. On the battlefield, Maria knew how to hold a perimeter. On this porch, she drew a new line, one the whole street could see. The call had already been made, the warrant already filed, the cameras already rolling. Hi, ChatGPT. Elena arrived at the prenatal clinic with Robert signing in with a practiced smile. The elevator doors opened. 2 federal agents stepped out and walked straight toward her. "Elena Isabel Torres?" She nodded, confused, then wary. The agents showed badges. "You are under arrest for identity theft, medical fraud, and unlawful use of genetic material." They read her rights. The cuffs clicked. She flinched and lifted her hands as if to shield her belly. Phones were already up. A receptionist froze with a clipboard in midair. A patient gasped. Someone said, "Are they arresting a pregnant woman?" Another answered, "They said stolen embryos." Elena twisted toward the cameras. "I chose life. My sister abandoned them." Robert tried to block the lenses with his hand. "Stop filming." The agents guided her down the hall. The red light over exam room 2 glowed as the door swung shut behind them. The hallway noise thinned into a tight, stunned silence, and then the clips hit the internet. Within hours, the 30-second video of a pregnant woman being led away in cuffs was everywhere. Feeds, group chats, breaking news tickers. Comment sections split open. Some called Alina brave. More called it theft. The hashtags multiplied, but one rose above the rest. #stolen service. Military spouses stitched their own stories to the clip. Bank accounts drained while a partner was deployed, leases signed without consent, family borrowing heirlooms that never came back. Veterans wrote about trust as a currency and how easily it gets spent when you aren't home to guard it. Lawyers threaded primers on consent and chain of custody. Nurses explained what a clinic should have done. Maria didn't post. JAG did. A short statement named the charges, affirmed the ongoing investigation, and asked for privacy for the children to come. The silence from Maria wasn't weakness, it was strategy. Let the evidence speak. Let the country watch. By dusk, news producers were booking panels. Commentators rehearsed takes. The clip kept rolling, and the story stopped belonging to one family. It belonged to anyone who had ever learned the hard way that absence can be weaponized. And now the whole city knew the name on the warrant. The next chapter wouldn't play out in whispers. It would play out in court. Elena moved fast. A publicist, a makeup chair, a soft-lit studio. She sat with one hand on her belly and the other clutching a tissue that never touched her eyes. "I chose life," she told the morning show host. "My sister chose deployment. I'm giving these babies what she wouldn't." Clips rolled on repeat. Elena walking out of a clinic months earlier. Elena and a church charity. Elena framed by sunlit windows. Lower thirds read, "Aunt or mother who owns an embryo." Commentators nodded gravely. A pro-life group reposted her interview with the caption, "Courage Under Fire." A lifestyle magazine printed a cover, "The Sister Who Wouldn't Give Up." The narrative was clean, a woman saving 3 lives from a freezer. The messier parts, the stolen ID, the forged signature, the IP trail, were pushed to footnotes or not mentioned at all. Maria didn't sit for interviews. She didn't pose. She countered with paper. Her attorney posted a public legal packet, docket numbers, subpoenas, the subpoenaed security, still of Elena holding Maria's driver's license, the consent forms side by side with Maria's verified signature, the chain of custody log showing the 0803 thaw authorization, the metadata summary tracing the login to Elena's home network. Each page stamped, dated, unromantic. A pinned statement read, "Fact. The embryos were created by Captain Maria Isabel Torres and her late husband." Fact transfer occurred after identity theft and without the genetic parent's consent. Fact, courts do not terminate pregnancies. They do assign parental rights after fraud. Request, respect privacy for the children and allow due process to continue. Journalists began to split into lanes. Some followed the feelings, replaying Elena's soundbites. Others followed the documents, building timelines that didn't care who looked more sympathetic on camera. Threads filled with screenshots, arrows, and dates. A side-by-side GIF of the signature overlay went viral with the caption, "Copied, not written." 2 hashtags rose and collided, #stolen-service and #she-chose-life. Under one, military families told hard stories about absence being exploited. Under the other, strangers called Maria cold. Then a third current formed, quiet, steady people who had done IVF writing about consent, consent, consent. Maria stayed where she had started with the facts. The more she said nothing, the louder the document sounded. By week's end, producers wanted a courtroom, not a couch. And that was a lane Maria could live in. The courtroom was full but quiet. Elena Isabel Torres sat beside her attorney, one hand on her belly. Across the aisle, Captain Maria Isabel Torres faced forward, shoulders square, eyes steady. Elena's attorney rose first. "Your Honor, possession is 9/10 of the law. My client is carrying these children. My client is carrying these children. She has endured the risks, the appointments, the sleepless nights. Biology recognizes that reality, so should the court. Maria's attorney stood. Possession is not a deed, and pregnancy is not a title. These embryos were transferred after identity theft, forged consent, and a digital break-in. Gestation obtained through fraud does not convert stolen genetic material into lawful parentage. Elena's attorney pressed on. But the children are alive because of my client. She chose life when Captain Torres chose deployment. Maria did not look away. I chose to serve after my husband died. I did not choose to be erased. The judge leaned forward. Counsel addressed the law. Maria's attorney nodded. Parental rights flow from consent and lawful origin. Chain of custody was breached. The clinic's video shows Elena presenting Captain Torres's ID. The signatures don't match. The portal login traces to Elena's home network. Under these facts, gestation cannot launder theft. Elena's attorney tried a softer angle. Intent matters. My client intended to love, raise, and protect. Maria's attorney answered even softer. Intent cannot cure a lack of consent. In family law, as in criminal law, you cannot keep what you took by fraud simply because you held it long enough. The judge turned to Elena. Mrs. Torres, did you enter the clinic using your sister's identification? Elena's throat worked. I presented what they accepted. The judge turned back to the record. The court will not order termination, but the principle is clear. Fraud cannot create parental rights. Gestation without lawful consent to transfer is not ownership. A pause. Proceed to the question of custody on that basis. Maria exhaled, not in triumph, but in recognition. The line had been drawn where it always should have been, at consent. The courtroom held its breath when the judge returned. He set a thin stack of papers on the bench and spoke without theatrics. On the facts before the court, the embryos were created by Captain Maria Isabel Torres and her late husband. The subsequent transfer was procured through identity theft, forged consent, and unauthorized system access. The pregnancy cannot be terminated by court order. However, fraud cannot create parental rights. He looked from one table to the other. Accordingly, the court declares that the embryos and any children born from them are the legal children of Captain Torres. Custody will be addressed consistent with this ruling. The rustle in the gallery was a storm held inside a throat. Elena's shoulders tightened. Her attorney whispered quickly. Maria's hands stayed folded on the table, but the tremor in her breath finally evened. The judge continued. Interim orders. The delivering hospital shall list Captain Torres as the legal parent on all neonatal charts at birth. Medical decision-making rests with Captain Torres immediately upon delivery. Ms. Elena Isabel Torres is restrained from making medical decisions for the infants and from representing herself as their parent. A no-contact order is issued as to Captain Torres except through counsel. He tapped the page once. The clinic's conduct is referred to the appropriate regulatory body for review. Silence stretched, changed shape, and broke into sound, pens clicking, shoes scuffing the soft scrape of chairs. Maria stood. For the first time since the call in Afghanistan, the ground beneath her felt level. Elena rose too, fury bright at the edges of her eyes. I cared them, she said, voice cracking. I kept them alive. The judge didn't raise his tone. You carried what you took. The law will not bless a theft. Outside, microphones waited. Inside, the clerk stamped the order. What began as a phone call in a desert had become a line in case law. Gestation without lawful consent does not transfer parenthood. Maria stepped into the hallway, her attorney at her side. The decision didn't feel like triumphs, it felt like oxygen. There was still a birth ahead. There was still a fight to manage safely. But the future had a name again, hers. Elena shot to her feet, chair legs skidding across the floor. You can't take them from me. I carried them. I kept them alive. Her words cracked, then rose sharp enough to startle the gallery. She pointed at Maria, tears streaking her makeup. "You abandoned them. I didn't." The bailiff stepped forward, palm out, a quiet warning. Elena's attorney tugged at her sleeve, whispering for her to sit. She didn't. "I am their mother," she insisted, voice breaking, "and no paper can change that." Across the aisle, Captain Maria Isabel Torres didn't speak. She stayed seated, hands folded, eyes steady on the seal above the bench. No triumph, no smirk, only breath measured to the length of the moment. Her attorney slid the certified order into a folder. Maria nodded once, signing where the clerk indicated. A camera flash popped near the doorway. Elena flinched and turned toward it, sogging louder. "Tell them what you did," she shouted. "Tell them you chose war over family." Maria stood smoothing the edge of the folder with her thumb. She neither answered nor looked back. The judge's words were on the record. The rest could blow itself out against the walls and the microphones outside. Two women with the same last name had made two different choices. One chose spectacle, the other chose stewardship. When the courtroom emptied, what lingered wasn't the shouting, it was the silence that held its ground. Maria had gone back to duty after the ruling, back to the rhythm of briefings, patrol grids, and meals eaten standing. The order on the docket was solid. The law was finally on paper. All she had to do was wait for 3 heartbeats to arrive. The message found her at dawn. American Red Cross message, emergency. Elena Isabel Torres in preterm labor, 28 weeks. Hospital requesting legal parent present at delivery. Travel authorization recommended. She read it twice. The tent was quiet except for canvas snapping in the wind. Her hands were steady, but the world tilted in that familiar way, as if someone had pulled one leg off the table of her life. She went to her commander. No speeches, just the facts and the paper. He didn't ask questions he already knew the answers to. "Go," he said. "Now." The machine moved again. A seat to Kuwait, then Germany, then home. A rucksack packed by people who understood what it means to move fast for reasons that have nothing to do with combat. A photo of James slid into the top pocket just like last time. On the runway, heat shimmered over the tarmac. Maria tightened the strap across her chest and tucked the court order into the same pocket as her ID. Legal parent. 2 words that felt less like a title and more like a vow. 30,000 feet up the desert turned to cloud. Maria kept her eyes on the order, tracing the line that named her the decision-maker at birth. She didn't pray for an outcome, only for time, for lungs to mature, for machines to be ready, for the chaos of a too early arrival to happen in a room where her name meant safety. When the wheels hit American soil, her phone buzzed again. C-section likely. NICU team on standby. She exhaled. Not relief, alignment. The fight was still the fight, but now it had a location, a clock, and a door she could walk through. She stepped into the arrivals hall with a carry-on and a folder. No cameras this time. No microphones. Just a corridor that smelled like coffee and tired hope. Maria didn't rehearse what she would say to Elena. There would be time for courtrooms and consequences. Right now, there were 3 lives coming early and a mother who had a job to do. She walked toward the exit, the order warm in her hand. 28 weeks. Too soon for everything except love and logistics. She could do both. The hallways smelled like antiseptic and fear. A nurse swung the double doors and led Maria into labor and delivery. Over the monitors, a thin chorus of beeps kept time with 3 small heartbeats. The room was too bright. The air felt crowded. Elena was already on the table, hair stuck to her temples, voice raw from shouting. "You can't let her in here," she screamed. "I'm their mother." The charge nurse didn't flinch. "Court order on file. Medical decisions belong to Captain Maria Isabel Torres." She lifted the chart for everyone to see. "Bans belong to Captain Torres. Neonatal consent belongs to Captain Torres." Maria stepped closer, calm because the moment required it. "I'm here for the babies," she said. "Do what you need to do." The obstetrician glanced up. We don't have time. 32 seconds between contractions. Fetal heart tones are variable. We're going now. The room shifted into choreography. Scrub techs passed instruments. A pediatric team waited at the warmer. Another nurse checked the labels on 3 tiny wristbands, reading Maria's name out loud each time. Elena arched and cried out, "Don't let her touch them. I carried them." The charge nurse's tone stayed even. "No one is taking anything. We are delivering 3 premature infants. Captain Torres is the legal parent. Focus on your breathing." The first cry came thin and defiant, like a line drawn on glass. A nurse called the time. Baby A, male. The pediatric team moved as one, clearing airways, wrapping, counting. They held him up for a heartbeat so Maria could see his face. She exhaled and nodded. Go. Seconds later, another cry split the room. Baby B, male. The nurse checked the band again. Parent, Captain Maria Isabel Torres. The words settled the way a verdict settles. Elena thrashed on the table. Give them to me. I can feed them. The lactation nurse shook her head. Per order, no feeding from the gestational carrier. NICU protocols only. The third arrival took longer. The room got quieter, then sharper. Baby C, female. The cry was smaller, but it was there. Someone said, "She's a fighter." Maria's hand found the rail of the bed and held it like a lifeline. 3 clear bassinets rolled in a row. 3 sets of tiny hats. 3 tags printed with the same name. A clerk confirmed, voice steady. Legal parent on all charts, Captain Maria Isabel Torres. For a moment, everything stilled. Elena sobbed into the mask, spent and furious. Maria didn't answer her. She kept her eyes on the warmers and the steady hands working over her children. The neonatologist stepped over. They're early, but they're here. We're taking them to NICU now. You can walk with us to the doors. Maria nodded. She touched the edge of each blanket, not interfering, just present. I'm here, she whispered to 3 small foreheads. I'm here. The doors to NICU opened. The lights were softer there. Machines waited with patience. The fight outside the room could rage or not. Inside, the only law that mattered was care. In the quiet outside NICU, a clerk brought a clipboard and 3 tiny birth packet envelopes. Captain Torres, we need full names for charts and bands. Maria took the pen. The hallway smelled like hand gel and warm plastic. She thought of a night long before the accident, James on the couch, a notebook open, the 2 of them trading names like promises. For baby A, she said, steady, Matthew James Torres. She spelled it out. Matthew because he felt like a gift even before he existed. James for his father. The clerk typed. The printer hummed. A new bracelet slid from the tray. Matthew James Torres. Parent, capped, Maria Isabel Torres. For baby B, Michael David Torres. A breath. Michael, for strength when I don't have enough. David, the middle name James carried. The second bracelet printed crisp and certain. And for baby C, Sophia Marie Torres. Sophia for wisdom. Marie for the part of me I nearly forgot. The nurse checked each label against the order, then against Maria's ID. All charts updated. Legal parent, Captain Maria Isabel Torres. She looked up, not formal now, just human. Do you want to tell them yourself? Maria stepped to the warmers. She didn't touch the cords or the tiny hats. She pressed 1 finger to each clear wall. Matthew James, she whispered, you are wanted. Michael David, you are safe. Sophia Marie, you are seen. Across the unit, monitors kept time like soft metronomes. A tech wheeled in the new bands and swapped the temporary tags for the names Maria and James had chosen years ago. The old stickers, the ones Elena had tried to use, went into the shred bin without ceremony. The clerk returned with forms. Initial here and here. Maria signed the same hand that had held a rifle and a ring, now writing a different kind of oath. On the last page, a single line waited, Mother. She printed her name, then wrote it again slower. Not a claim, a confirmation. The nurse gathered the packets. Welcome, Matthew. Welcome, Michael. Welcome, Sophia. Maria stood a moment longer, letting the names settle into the room, into her bones. She didn't look back toward the corridor where voices rose and fell. This was the center. This was the answer. 3 names spoken out loud, turning grief into lineage. 2 months after the birth, when the triplets were strong enough to leave the NICU, the court reconvened. The judge read from a final order that didn't need drama to carry weight. On the record, Captain Maria Isabel Torres is awarded full legal and physical custody of the minor children. Birth certificates shall reflect Captain Torres as the mother. Ms. Elena Isabel Torres has no parental rights and no visitation. A no-contact order remains in effect except through counsel and only by future court leave. A separate line followed. On the criminal counts, identity theft, medical fraud, unlawful use of genetic material, Ms. Elena Isabel Torres is sentenced to a term of imprisonment. Upon release, any petition for contact must be filed and heard. None is presumed. The clerk stamped the order. Pages slid into manila folders. The room exhaled. Maria signed where she was told to sign. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like safety finally finding a place to sit. The law had caught up to the truth gestation. Obtained by fraud does not create parenthood, and love without consent is not a claim. Outside, the day was bright and cold. Maria's attorney handed her certified copies. The hospital would receive its own. Later, discharge papers would list her name on every page. The bracelets around 3 small wrists would match the bands she had chosen. No supervised visits to schedule, no handoffs in parking lots, just a home with 3 cribs, and a mother whose name was now more than a promise. It was protection. Somewhere else, cameras would frame Elena as a martyr. In here, the record was simple. The children belonged with the person who never stole them. Maria tucked the order into her bag and headed for the elevator. 3 car seats waited in the trunk. She had never liked the word victory. Today, she preferred another one, custody. The custody order was barely a week old when Maria's doorbell rang. A florist's bundle sat on the mat, pink ribbon, a card in her mother's handwriting. For the babies, family heals. Maria folded the card once, then again, and set it in a drawer she no longer opened. Her mother called that evening. No apology, only revision. You'll understand when you see how much she loves them, she said, meaning Elena, without saying the name. We did what you were too hurt to do. Maria kept her voice even. You replaced consent with urgency and called it love. Do not contact me again. She ended the call and added the number to her block list. The line went quiet in a way that felt permanent. 2 days later, her father knocked. No flowers, no speeches. A worn duffel over his shoulder, the posture of a man who had stood too long at attention. He held the triplets one by one, memorizing their faces like coordinates. I read the order, he said, and the affidavits. 20 years in uniform taught me what an oath is worth. Your mother broke one that doesn't need a ceremony to be binding. He set Sophia back in the bassinet and met Maria's eyes. I filed. I'm leaving. It wasn't loud. It was decisive. He stayed the week on the couch, sterilizing bottles, learning the hum of the white noise machine, walking laps with Matthew when the world got too big for a 3-pound body. When he left for his motel, he took his dress blues and a folder thick with copies, the court order, the clinic screenshots, a will, updated to name Maria guardian and sole executor for anything that once had his name on it. Holiday lines drew themselves. No invitations. No compromise meeting halfway. Maria changed the locks, froze her credit, and revoked every broad power of attorney she'd ever signed. At the bank, a manager notarized a new set of documents while Michael slept on her chest, and the pen trembled just enough to make the signature human. Her mother sent letters that spoke in circles. forgiveness, family, God's plan, never once writing the word wrong. Maria returned each one unopened, stamped refused, not as punishment, as boundary. Her father, meanwhile, showed up in ways that didn't need an audience. He built a crib rail that didn't squeak. He labeled NICU meds with block letters a sleepy brain couldn't misread. He taught Maria a military trick for burping 2 babies at once. When people asked how the family was, he learned to answer truthfully without cruelty. We're smaller now and steadier. On paper, the family tree still shared a trunk. In practice, it had forked for good. The house grew quiet in the best way. 3 cribs, 1 dog-eared custody order in a fireproof box, and a calendar that belonged to no one outside its walls. Maria didn't celebrate the division. She honored it, the way you honor a healed scar, not for how it looks, but for what it protects. One night, after the last feeding, she stood at the window and whispered into the dark, "Dad, thank you." He didn't hear it. He didn't need to. The babies did the way children learn what love is by watching what it refuses to excuse. Some losses are loud and temporary. This one was quiet and forever. And still there was peace. Morning in Maria's house had a rhythm. 3 bottles lined up in order, 3 tiny spoons, 3 color-coded blankets that always seemed to trade beds in the night. Matthew James watched the light crawl across the wall. Michael David kicked at the air like he had somewhere important to be. Sophia Marie studied faces with the quiet intensity of someone taking notes. Maria moved through the routine the way a medic moves through triage, calm, exact, loving. She warmed milk, checked charts, kissed foreheads. The custody order stayed in the fireproof box, now not because she needed to look at it, but because she didn't. The law had done its part. The rest was parenting. She kept the lessons simple and repeated them until they belonged to the air in the house. Truth first, she said at breakfast, when little hands pointed at spilled oatmeal. We don't hide the mess, we clean it. Honor next, she said when Matthew knocked over Michael's blocks and froze guilty. If you break it, you help fix it. If you hurt someone, you help them feel better. And boundaries always, she said when Sophia reached for a toy in Michael's lap. Mariah crouched until she was eye level. Ask first. Your body, your voice, your choice. The same is true for everyone else. At the park, a boy tried to take Matthew's truck. Mariah didn't interfere. She put a hand on Matthew's back and waited. "No," Matthew said, small but firm. "That's mine. You can have a turn after me." The boy blinked, then nodded. Mariah's hand didn't leave his back until she felt his breath steady. Boundaries weren't just rules. They were something you could feel like a hand between your shoulder blades when you needed strength. In the evenings, there was truth time. No big speeches, just one true thing from each person at the table. "Michael likes the blue cup," Maria would say, and Michael would grin like someone had translated him. "Sophia is brave," Granddad would add on the nights he stayed over, and Sophia would bang her spoon as if to say, "Correct." Mom misses James. Maria would finish sometimes the way you open a window to let in air. The babies didn't understand the sentence yet. They understood the tone. Truth didn't make the room heavy. It made the room honest. There were stories about their father scaled to small ears, that he ran toward trouble to pull someone out, that he laughed with his whole face, that he and Mom picked names when the world still felt simple. Maria never turned James into a saint. She kept him a person. That's what children trust. On Sundays, they passed the framed photo on the hallway table. 3 little hands would pat the glass in turn. "Good morning, Dad," Maria said. "We're okay." When the triplets slept, Maria wrote notes for the future and slid them into a shoebox, a strip of hospital bracelet plastic, the first NICU hat, a list of house rules written in block letters. Tell the truth even when it's small. Honor your promises even when no one is watching. Ask for consent every time. Love is not possession. Our name stands for service and for safety. Sometimes the house felt too quiet after a day of noise. Maria would stand in the doorway and listen to 3 steady breaths. 3 small hearts, she thought, not as a weight now, but as a cadence. There were hard days, the ones with fevers and paperwork and memories that arrived uninvited. On those days, she would strap 2 babies into a double carrier, tuck the third against her chest, and walk the block once, then twice, letting the rhythm of footsteps smooth the edges. A neighbor waved. Granddad's crib rail never squeaked. Every night ended the same way. She touched 3 foreheads and spoke 3 short sentences. Matthew James, you are wanted. Michael David, you are safe. Sophia Marie, you are seen. She was not rehearsing at pace anymore. She was raising a family. The lesson traveled from her mouth to their bones: truth, honor, boundary. The 3 pillars held the roof. The past still existed. It just didn't run the house. And when someone asked how they were doing, Maria learned to answer without apology and without performance. We're small, she said. We're steady. We're loved. You can want something more than anything, but that doesn't mean you're entitled to take it. Love without consent is control. Grief is not a license. Service is not an invitation to be exploited. Boundaries protect the living and honor the dead. In this story, the law drew a line, but that line began with one word: consent. If you want a family, build it with truth, with honor, and with permission. Anything less is theft dressed as hope. Through her eyes, that is the lesson she will teach 3 small hearts every day. Consent, boundaries, and documentation are everyday armor. Consent first, always. Love without consent becomes control, whether in relationships, family favors, or medical choices. Boundaries are love in practice. Saying no protects what you value. It doesn't make you cold. Document everything. Keep copies, timelines, and written confirmations, especially for medical, legal, and financial decisions. Narrow your power of attorney. Grant the least authority needed. Set clear end dates and revoke on return. Harden your digital life. Unique passwords, 2FA, credit freeze and fraud alerts review activity monthly. If you use IVF, require double verification, photo ID, plus passphrase written no transfer without X present, and access logs. If you'll be away, deployment, travel, caregiving, name a trusted advocate not dependent on family pressure, leave a checklist and schedule post-return audits. Teach it forward. Model consent and boundaries at home so the next generation treats them as normal, not negotiable. If this story moved you or gave you a tool you can use, subscribe to Through Her Eyes. You'll get real transformative stories plus practical takeaways you can apply the same day. Subscribe, turn on the bell, and share this episode with someone who needs a reminder that consent and boundaries save futures. Question for you: what boundary do you wish you'd set sooner? Drop it in the comments. I read every one.